For more than 60 years, this little island in New York Harbor was the front door to a new life for millions of people. But, the story of Ellis Island is so much more than just numbers. It's a really profound chapter in the story of America itself. So today, we're going to break down its incredible history, all the way from a humble oyster bed to the nation's gateway.
This quote just says it all, doesn't it? It's from a photo of a young Finnish stowaway in 1926, and it perfectly captures the spirit of this place. Can you imagine the courage it took to leave everything behind for a shot at a dream, knowing the first thing you had to do was pass the test of Ellis Island?
Alright, so here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll look at the island's many lives before it became famous, then how the Golden Door opened up. We'll walk through the immigrants' ordeal, what it was really like. Then we'll see how the gate started to close, and finally explore its lasting legacy.
Okay, first up, let's peel back the layers. Because long before Ellis Island became the gateway to America, it lived a bunch of other lives that might actually surprise you. The island's transformation was gradual, but wow, was it dramatic. It started out as just a simple oyster bed for the local Lenape people, and then the Dutch settlers. Then, a merchant named Samuel Ellis bought it, and boom, that's where we get the name. By 1808, the US government bought it, and for the next 80 years, it was anything but a place of welcome. It was a military installation, Fort Gibson, there to defend New York Harbor. So how in the world did a military fort become the front door to America? Well, in the late 19th century, the federal government took over control of immigration, and they needed a new central spot to process everyone. Fort Gibson's time was up, a whole new era was about to begin.
On New Year's Day, 1892, this brand new massive wooden station opened its doors. People at the time said it looked like a fancy resort hotel. On its very first day, it processed almost 700 immigrants, and the very first one was a 17-year-old Irish girl named Annie Moore. But just 5 years later, absolute disaster. A fire broke out and burned the entire wooden complex to the ground in just 2 hours. Miraculously, nobody was killed, but decades of irreplaceable immigration records going all the way back to 1855 were just gone. The nation's new gateway was a pile of ash. From those ashes, though, rose something much, much grander. A new fireproof station opened in 1900, and the scale of what happened next is just staggering. Over the next half-century, 12 million people passed through its halls. In the peak year of 1907 alone, over 1 million people were processed. Just think about that. On one single day that year, nearly 12,000 people arrived. It's unbelievable. So, what was it actually like for them? For every single person who stepped off that ferry, Ellis Island was this place of incredible hope, but also profound fear. It was the absolute final barrier between their old life and their new one. The whole process was designed for speed, a total whirlwind of an examination that might only take a few hours. First, a super fast medical inspection. As people walked up the stairs to the Great Hall, doctors would be watching their every move, their breathing. Then came the part everyone dreaded, the legal inspection, where an official would grill them with 29 questions, all to figure out if they were likely to become a public charge. And get this, a simple piece of chalk could decide your entire fate. During that medical line, doctors used this kind of secret code of chalk marks on people's clothing. An X meant a suspected mental defect. An H was for a heart condition. Now, these marks didn't mean you were automatically getting sent back, but they guaranteed you were getting pulled from the line for a much more grueling examination. Now, the vast majority of immigrants, about 98%, were ultimately let into the country. But that other 2%, that still represents over 250,000 people whose dreams ended right here. For them, and for everyone who was terrified of that outcome, Ellis Island wasn't the Golden Door, it was the Island of Tears. This brings us to a huge misconception. We have all heard the stories, right? Overworked officials just carelessly changing complicated family names. While historical records show this almost never happened, inspectors worked directly from the ship manifests, which were filled out abroad, and a lot of them were multilingual themselves. So those Americanized names, that usually happened years later by choice of the families themselves. But that Golden Door wouldn't stay open forever. After decades as the world's busiest port of entry, a combination of new laws and global conflict would completely change Ellis Island's whole purpose. The big turning point was the Immigration Act of 1924. This law set up really strict quotas based on national origin, which choked off the flow of immigrants, especially from Southern and Eastern Europe. The change was so dramatic. Inspections were now mostly done at US consulates abroad, and Ellis Island's main role as a processing center was effectively over. With fewer immigrants to process, the island took on a much darker role. It became a detention center. During both World Wars, it was used to intern thousands of German, Italian, and Japanese nationals who were considered enemy aliens. And later, during the Cold War, it was used to detain suspected communists and others who were barred from the country by new security laws.
By the early 1950s, the massive complex was pretty much empty, and it was costing the government a fortune to maintain. On November 12, 1954, the very last detainee, a Norwegian merchant seaman, was released, and the ferry took its final journey. The Golden Door had quietly swung shut. But the story doesn't just end there. After decades of silence and decay, Ellis Island would undergo one final, absolutely remarkable transformation.
For almost 30 years, the island was just left to rot. The grand halls where millions had gathered fell completely silent. Paint was peeling, roofs were collapsing, and nature just started to take the buildings back. It was a ghost of its former self, a forgotten piece of American history. Then came this incredible effort of preservation. In the 1980s, a massive fundraising campaign led to the largest historical restoration project in the country's history. And in 1990, the main building, beautifully restored to its 1920s appearance, reopened to the public as a museum dedicated to the very people it once processed. And this really gets at the island's true legacy. It's not just in the restored buildings, it's woven right into the American people. While 12 million people pass through its gates, it's estimated today that over 100 million Americans, that's about 2 in every 5, can trace at least one ancestor back to Ellis Island. The history of Ellis Island is etched into the very fabric of the United States, and it leaves us with a powerful question to really think about. As we look at this whole history of hope and fear and transformation, what does it mean for us, right now, to be a nation of